It's another week, and we are back. Welcome to the after show. I am Geoff. Actually, right now it says I am JS, which is super not cool. JS would be my podcast partner, and he is not here on this particular program. So let me get that changed over. Once again, I am Geoff. That over there is that Valkyrie girl. We know her around here as Editor Megan. We are 2/5 of the Geeks and Co., and we are bringing you The Legend of Vox Machina, Season 1, Episode 5. We're back. We've been off for a couple of weeks due to some personal issues. We are back to our rewatch. If you've not caught the after show before, especially for this particular round, yes, we are on a rewatch of The Legend of Vox Machina. We started right back at the very beginning after doing the after show for Season 3 as those episodes came out. Quick note for you, if you're checking us out for the first time, we have not watched any of the Critical Role campaign on YouTube or any other platform. We have only watched this show, and we are on a rewatch, hoping to catch some things this time that we may have missed or not understood the context for the last time we watched it. So we are still going in without any sort of knowledge about the campaign in its greater glory through YouTube, through the Critical Role gang. We've only seen the show once or before. Megan, you have watched this week's episode. What was this week's episode called? Fate's Journey.
I would say that's basically the title sums it up pretty well for this one. It seems a lot of the whole episode is them leaving the city that they were in and arriving in Whitestone. And there's a lot that happens in between that. But in my brain, I was like, a lot didn't happen this episode. And then you started naming off things, and I'm like, oh, a lot did happen this episode.
It is very much a setup episode, but it's also a character-driven episode. As I mentioned to you, we had a chance to talk, Megan and I, before we started recording. And yeah, each character kind of gets their own sort of moment or moments throughout this particular episode, which doesn't necessarily have a specific payoff in the long run, but it's the nature of the show. And why you kind of fall in love with it a little bit is not just the action and what's happening or the story even itself, because we're going to be honest with you, this particular story of the whole Whitestone thing, boy, howdy, does this go on a long time, if I recall correctly. But the character moments that we're getting, the world building that we're doing, and getting to fall in love with these particular characters for episodes just like this is really what's far more important to me anyways than the actual story itself. We start off with Vax, Vex, and Keyleth fleeing the guards. If you remember from last episode, they were trying to be arrested for their fight through the Briarwoods. They ran from that. They end up in Gilmore's shop after hours, of course, but they let drop to Gilmore, who catches them after hours, that they are vampire hunting. So I think they've decided that Silas is just a vampire. That's just, in fact, I think they're thinking they're actually both the Briarwoods are vampires.
I would say it sounds like they think they're both vampires at this point.
Yeah, just different class of vampires. Like Silas is clearly just like the muscle, and Delilah is the spooky one, is sort of thing, the weird one.
Yes. Definitely.
So they buy a bunch of different things, or at least they ask Gilmore a bunch of different things to go vampire hunting. Enchanted arrows, holy water. Gilmore mentions direct sunlight, but not just like any direct sunlight. It has to be like a huge amount of direct sunlight if you're going to fight vampires. And in a lovely character moment for our dear Keyleth, who is so sweet and so wholesome, and maybe not the sharpest knife in the drawer, she gets caught into a finger puzzle.
So to which perhaps she'll just stay like here for the rest of her life. Our
half-elven boy Vaxeldan helps Keyleth out with the finger puzzle, and they have a little bit of a moment. And this, kids, is a big heaping bowl of foreshadowing.
It's almost like they like each other. Aww.
There's gonna be some flirting. I'm telling you that now, but be patient is all I will say as far as that moving forward. The rest of the gang decides to steal a wagon with Percy driving.
Which we don't see, but we are told about.
It does happen off camera. And then they are heading to Whitestone. So this is the setup. They're leaving Iman, and they're heading to Whitestone to go and find out what's going on with whatever the Briarwoods have done to Percy's essentially ancestral home. He was royalty there as a Derulo. We do get a little bit of another little tiny, but not quite as dramatic or as overt as Vax and Keyleth, but we do get a tiny little bit of flirting between Vex and Percy in the wagon as well as they're driving. Now, granted, Percy is just a little bit distracted by
Vengeance.
literally his entire life blowing up since the Briarwoods showed up in Amman for the big state dinner last episode. So Percy's having himself a time. Apparently he has just the best resting bitch face that you've ever seen, at least
Lots of
the
practice.
best one Vex has ever seen, and that's saying a lot because I feel like Vex is like the queen of resting bitch face. Especially with that, she's calling everybody darling and having the British accent. She just comes across as so very, very bitchy. So for her to say to Percy that he is mastering the resting bitch face is something or something else. In the meantime, our boy Scanlan, who actually has quite a bit to do in this episode, don't you roll your eyes when I mention Scanlan over there. I can see how much you love Scanlan, is trying to read the book that our boy Vex stole. Sorry, our boy Vax. I'm going to mess up Vex and Vax this whole episode, apparently. Stole from Delilah Briarwood. He's trying to interpret it, and he finds something in reference to a temple with a zipper twat, which...
A ziggurat.
Keyleth immediately is like, no, I'm pretty sure that's a ziggurat. And then we get a little tiny kind of like peek into what Keyleth's whole deal is. She talks about her Aramante. She talks about ruling the Ashanti at some point in her life later on when she's gone through her trials. It doesn't go deep into it, but it kind of gives us a sneak peek into what Keyleth is sort of up against when it comes to why she's out in the world adventuring. Yeah, exactly. We do get some sniffles from the back of the cart as someone is... who's
feeling the feelings.
What feelings is he feeling, Megan?
He's feeling the missing because he doesn't have his little priest. He is missing.
He misses Pickle, unfortunately. Our girl Pike, if you remember from last week's episode, has to go find her faith again. So she's off in search of a temple to the Everlight, which we'll catch up with Pike a little bit towards the end of this particular episode.
Yeah, but he's very quick to say that he's like, I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about what we're going to do without her because, like,
correct.
she's off.
Yeah, she's
like,
fine.
Grog
She'll be okay. Yes.
Grog is like the best hype man for Pike.
Yes, she's going to be fine. We're fucked without her. So, yes. And I think she said along the lines of like, you can talk to me and I'll still hear you. And he's like, I'm trying to talk to her, but it's so hard. So yes, Grog is very sad. Well, they get into this forest, and the forest is a lot of things, mostly creepy and dire and terrible. It is a long way from being beautiful in any way, shape, or form. But then in the forest, they run into what looks like a dog. And Megan's spirit character decides...
immediately out of the wagon. Oh, Pupper, are you hurt?
She literally says, Pupper.
Yes, she does.
Oh, little puppers. And it turns out they're not, in fact, little puppers.
It is not a puppers.
They look, if you've watched Stranger Things, guys, they're very much the demo dogs from Stranger Things. Their mouths and head, their whole head opens in 3 different flaps and such. And then things ensue. They come towards a bridge. So, sorry, one of the demo dogs snatches Scanlan. And remember, Delilah still wants this book back, this tome back, and she'll do anything she can. And Silas was convinced, too. Silas was like, don't worry, the book will come back to you. And it looks like that's exactly what's happening as Scanlan is going to Whitestone with the book, trying to read it.
Yep.
But it's not stopping the demo dogs.
It wraps around him and just carries him off into the air. The first time I saw this, I thought it was going to suck him and like pull him into its mouth.
Right. No, and that would have made a lot of sense. But no, they just run ahead of the cart with them, and they come to a point where there's a bridge out, I guess, and they have to go across this gap. And then we get what we have to say at least once every single episode that we're watching. Vox Machina at 100% power as all of them.
And 99% power is just Keyleth.
So Keyleth makes like this vine bridge for them, just literally on the fly with a wave of her hand. The doggos have Scanlan. Vax turns to Percy. Sorry, Vexalia turns to Percy and says, "Hiya," to which Percy replies, "Did you just hiya me?" I did. I literally wrote that down specifically with it. Did you just hiya me? Vex is even referred to as a ball breaker, which again, I laughed out loud, outrageously so. Excuse me. It looks like our boy Scanlan goes over the cliff with the demo dog and dies.
Everyone's so sad. They're just like, but Scanlan.
And in the end, what saved Scanlan from dying when he fell over the cliff?
Scanlan's hand!
Scanlan's hand!
just floating back up.
He doesn't actually say the Scalen's hand, which, come on, Vox Machina, you know what we're here for. We then get probably, I guess, maybe I'll say the second darkest moment of the episode, where we flash over to the Briarwoods in their castle, and a poor family shows up as the Briarwoods are talking to the former staff of Percy and his family, the Derulos. One of them, I think it's the Master at Arms, mentions, or maybe it was the teacher, mentions that their dinner guests have arrived, and it's clearly a poor family from the Whitestone itself. Yeah. And as they come in, there's the sweetest little girl, and she's so excited to be there. And Delilah and Silas kind of bend down and talk to her a bit and reassure her, and they kind of go off on their own, and they're there for dinner. I think we all know whose dinner.
I was going to say, I wasn't sure where they were going with that the first time, because I remember them putting the amulet that looks like Pike's symbol on the little girl, but I didn't notice that very easily, or at least I didn't connect that the first time that I watched it. But seeing it this time, I'm like, oh yeah, no, right away. That's where this is going.
I'm glad that you remembered it, because as they put that symbol of the Everlight on her, I'm like, what? Like I didn't remember. Like I didn't get why they put that on her initially.
No.
I didn't get that.
The first time that I saw it, I was like, oh, they're dinner guests.
Yeah.
They're going to be the guests that are had for dinner, which doesn't seem like is actually what
it does not. Well, I mean, they could have been like Silas could have still.
Yeah.
You know,
not only that.
We don't have to have everything in camera as far as that goes. Meanwhile, our intrepid adventurers decide that they're going to make camp for the evening, and then they're going to go around and tell some stories. Before that, though, someone's got a magic scroll they took out of Brimscythe's lair, our boy Scanlan, and starts to read from the scroll, and first turns into a little wee frog, much to Grog's amusement. It makes him handsomer, is what Frog says, by the way. Or what Grog says. Grog and the Frog. The whole show could be Grog and the Frog, and I would... He then turns into a giant striped unicorn type beast.
Oh, a hippocampus. Is
that what it was?
That kind of fish, I think. Yes.
And then he's tall, sexy girl Scanlan, apparently, which Grog is like, hello. Which reminds me, I guess
I'm very confused, but also horny.
Aroused, yes. I mean, this is a very horny show, kids. Let's be fair. But I think it is funny that throughout the course of the episodes that we've watched up until now, like I said, we've clearly seen some flirting between Vax'ildan and Keyleth. And I think we have some preliminary flirting between Vex'ahlia and Percy. But poor Grog, man. And of course, Scanlan just flirts with everybody. But I get the sense that our boy Grog just not in the market. Not in the market. Until he saw stupid, sexy Scanlan, and then he was like, well, maybe.
I would say that, and also the sexy dragon lady from the second episode.
Right. During this time, of course, we start exchanging stories of their strangest kills. We do get a little bit of Keyleth having her round of, not quite a lack of faith, but self-doubt, as far as that goes. And her story is not great.
Yeah, nope, just waiting for a dude to drown/burn in hot lava.
In lava. In fact, her words to him were quiet, quiet, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. During this time, while they're all telling their stories of their strangest kills, though, our little pickle, Pike, does make it to the temple for the Everlight and just describes to the priestess there, like, my amulet broke and I haven't been able to speak to the Everlight since she's taken in. It's really kind of the only update we get on Pike. I'm not going to lie to you guys, as far as, sorry, this is a bit of an aside. I don't really understand, like, especially if any of you have ever played D&D before, the worst thing that can happen in a campaign is one character goes off on their own to do something, because then when you're running the campaign, everybody has to sit and do nothing while the dungeon master tends to that one character on whatever they're doing. So it's a really weird move to have it in the show where one single character goes off to do something. Now, from what I understand, maybe moving forward, I don't know if the voice actress had some commitments earlier on, or throughout that she couldn't commit to doing those particular episodes, and maybe that's why they had Pike do that. I don't know. But as from a narrative standpoint, I'm not going to lie to you guys, it doesn't really work. I wish Pike had stayed with the group and it's just been a thing. But again, if there was a logistical issue, then I absolutely get it as far as that goes.
I think it's also kind of like trying to not let them be too overpowered when they go against the Briarwoods, because if Pike was fine and had access to the Everlight, like they were saying, like bright sunlight or bright light would be a good way to fight vampires.
Maybe. It's just interesting that, especially in this episode, we get literally about 10 seconds of Pike, and then we just never see or hear from her again. So, yes, like I said, they all start trading monster kills, strangest monster kills. Scanlan's is, of course, exactly what you would think it was. His was a monster he killed while copulating with said monster, and he was very quick to point out afterwards, when everybody was grossed out, he still finished. Guys, don't ever wonder why Scanlan's my favorite character. Of course, it seems like every single episode we have to have an obligatory everybody else going, what the fuck, when someone says something absolutely outrageous. So that's what happened here with Scanlan's strangest kill. And then, of course, we get to Percy Buzzkill, who was talking about, they ask him what his strangest kill is. He's like, we're about to face it as we go into the Whitestone and face the Briarwood. Like, he's all like very, very serious. That's right. Our girl Vexalia does pick up on some of the flirting that's going on between our boy Vaxeldan and Kiki, and she is not having it.
She's not on board for this. She does not want her brother tapping that.
Nope. In fact, she kind of starts to guilt Vax about making some very not subtle references, something about roots and stems and such. Like, we all know who she's talking about, including our boy Vaxeldan. And he says he has to reassure Vex at that point, like, don't worry, like, nothing will ever separate us. I'll never leave you. We're on a rewatch. I find that's fairly interesting based on what is to come in later seasons.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
as far as that goes,
that comes around.
We're not going to suggest it here. We're not going to mention it specifically here, but keep this in mind, guys, that our girl Vexalia was super not cool with Vax's roaming eye and flirtations with our girl Kiki. So we then get a really quick shot of everybody kind of goes to sleep, and Percy's there, and he's just flicking the barrels of the gun. And then what's on the barrels of the gun, Megan?
There's names on the barrels of the gun.
This is another heaping spoonful of foreshadowing, kids. We're going to find out who these individual people are that Percy has written down on the gun.
We already know some because they had Silas Briarwood, and Delilah Briarwood was two of the names.
Yes, but we have seen some of the other people that are named on the gun, but we've not been properly introduced to them yet or found out sort of their background as far as that goes. Now is the time, and you're right, Megan, now is the time where Percy starts to describe what Whitestone is like, or at least what it was like when he was there as a young lad. He mentions that it was beautiful. He talks specifically about the Sun Tree as well, how it's sort of the central hub of Whitestone. It kind of ties the entire town together. It's the most important piece of the town. And then they get to Whitestone, and everything Percy mentioned about Whitestone and how it looked,
here's the exact opposite. As Scanlan says, this town is majorly creepy.
Yep, just a wee bit. They do go into the town, and they're not in the town terribly briefly before they find out what one of the, quote, biggest threats in the town is.
Yep, which is giants?
There's a giant that walks by them, and not like a 10-foot tall giant, like not a dude that's like slightly taller than Grog, but like a 30 or 40-foot giant walks by them as they're hiding. And there's kind of another sort of cliched Vox Machina. There's definitely like a fuck moment where they're all just like, well, shit, now what are we gonna do? They do make it to the Sun Tree though, and I kind of wish they hadn't, because this would be, if the dinner guests were the second darkest part of this episode, this is clearly the darkest part of this episode. And I do want to remember, I want to mention, the first time I watched this, I didn't get. So even the second time, I still didn't get what was happening. I just assumed that because this family was so wholesome and poor, we were just going to relate to them being dead and how terrible the Briarwoods is. I still didn't pick it up. It took Keyleth to say,
it's us.
It's us. The people that were invited to dinner to the Briarwoods early in the episode are now dead and hung from the Sun Tree, and they're dressed as the individual members of Vox Machina, including our girl Pickle, who's not even there, which was why they put the Everlight medallion, that wooden Everlight medallion, on the little girl earlier. Jesus! Like, you don't have to end it on such a
Nope.
horrific note.
Listen, we're going dark and we're going sad.
Megan and I have not been shy about how we feel about the Whitestone storyline. It's a lot more of the second season than either one of us kind of remembered, and we're not necessarily saying it's terrible, but this episode was, other than some colorful moments and some character moments throughout that I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, this episode's a fucking bummer, man. Like, there's like nothing good happens in this episode. Delilah gets the book back. The family is murdered. Vax is made to feel terrible for flirting with Keyleth. Grog is missing Pike. Everything's a bummer in this episode, guys.
As Grog would say, this episode, buzzkill.
Yeah, super buzzkill, much like our boy Percy, guys. If you have some opinions in this episode, maybe there's something that we missed. I know for Megan, I'm sure it's the fact that there was no trinket in this episode, which automatically makes it a bit of a downer, especially for our girl Megan. But if you guys have any specific opinions about this episode, whether they be good or bad, or if there is some light at the end of the tunnel that you guys want to talk about, go ahead and put it in the comments below. If you are just coming across us here, thank you so much for watching this week. Please, if you would be so kind, go ahead and throw us that subscribe and that like. We are the very definition of a small, poor operation. There's exactly 5 of us that do this on the entire team, and there's only really just 3 of us that run the YouTube channel side of things. So anything that you can do to help us out that costs you absolutely nothing to help us out in the algorithm, we really appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Megan, is there anything you want to say about this particular episode before we get out of here this week?
No, I think I'm good. We hit the points. Set.
Guys, we're back, baby. We'll be here next week with episode 6 of the first season of Vox Machina on our rewatch. Don't forget to check it out on Amazon Prime. And until we see you next time, stay geeky, everyone.